Okay. Okay, I'll call the meeting to order at 6:03. Roll call. Vicki Bevins,
Here.
Nick MacArthur,
Here.
Gary Coben,
Here.
Terry Dorman. Here. Christy Haverkamp absent, Alan Hogo here, John Zimma.
Here.
Pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll move on. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Motion.
Nick.
Motion by Derek, second by Nick.
Sure.
Roll call vote. Alan, or Derek Coben,
Yes.
Nick MacArthur,
Yes.
Vicki Bevins,
Yes.
John Zimma,
Yes.
Terry Dorman,
Yes.
Alan Hogo, yes, motion approved. And right now, we're gonna move up Chris from Miller McDonald with the review of the audit.
Okay, I'm sure most of you remember me from previous years. I'm Chris with Miller McDonald, and I'm kind of your representative from our firm for the audit. I tried to do this a little different this year to kind of hone in on just big picture things and zero in more towards the end. So overall, the district audit has us reporting on 4 items. First, the opinion on the financial statements. Second, on Minnesota legal compliance. As a school district in Minnesota, we're required to test compliance with the various Minnesota legal compliance guide sections that are applicable. And we found no issues there and have no findings for this year. The third thing would be the audit is required to be done in accordance with government auditing standards, which basically focuses on internal control, compliance with laws and regulations, grants and contracts, laws, etc., stuff like that. And we didn't have any new changes or findings in that area this year either. And then the fourth thing is the single audit. The single audit is required when you expend more than $750,000 of federal aid, which you do. This year, we tested impact aid. You have to test a major program based largely on size and risk. So we tested impact aid. That is your largest program. And again, we don't have any findings this year either. So those are all good things. So then zeroing in a little closer to the purpose of the audit and the gist would be the audit on the financial statements. So page 2 of our report is that, and that's where that starts. There we provide the opinion on the financial statements, which would include the numbers themselves, how they're presented, and the footnote disclosures. So our opinion is unqualified or unmodified, and that's basically what's known as a clean opinion, and that's also good. We also note new this year, key emphasis of the matter would be that we have a change in accounting principle this year, so that's new. We were required to implement GASB Statement 84, fiduciary activities. So the big change there is this standard changes how certain fiduciary activities are reported based largely on the concept of administrative involvement. So this brought 2 key changes in how certain items were reported by the district previously. First would be student activities. Formerly, those activities not under board control were kept outside the district's books and records, and they were required to undergo a separate audit themselves. So if you recall in previous years, there was another handout, a thin student activities audit. And with the new standard, those are now brought into the general fund. And that occurred as of the beginning of the year. So those activities are now tracked with the new finance code to track them, and the residuals are kept track of in the reserved fund balance specifically for student activities. So it's not like you're not keeping track of them anymore. They're brought into the general fund with and under basically board control policies that you'd follow along with your other district expenditures and revenues. The second major change would be scholarships. Scholarship fund used to be a separate non-operating fiduciary fund outside the district's governmental funds. Now with the new standards, since the district has administrative involvement in these funds and none of the scholarships were set up with an outside legal trust entity, they also get brought into the general fund as of the beginning of the year. And they're tracked with the separate finance code and reserve fund balance as well. So if there's any concern as to whether or not benefactors who donate to these funds, if they're concerned that the money isn't being followed or no one knows what their balance is, that would be incorrect. This money is still being tracked and being accounted for appropriately. So as a result, at the beginning of the year, the general fund balance and the district-wide net position were adjusted with the addition of both these funds. So there's a restatement of those fund balances by $249,224. So you'll see in various places where it says beginning balance restated, that's what that means. It doesn't agree to last year because of this implementation. So moving on, if you remember from previous years, the statements are broken down into two main sections. The fund financial statements, that's how the district keeps the records and reports to MDE. And then those statements are the ones that are more towards the back. And then, of course, in the front, we convert to a district-wide statement that kind of combines the governmental activities. And the major difference being that we now incorporate with those the long-term liabilities and debt, pension liability, OPEB liability, and then also the fixed assets and buildings and equipment and stuff like that. And then also there's now only, of course, one fiduciary fund. As I mentioned, the scholarship fund got rolled into the general fund, so that leaves the OPEB trust fund. And then also new this year, the building construction fund was open to account for the building bond proceeds and their expenditures. And at the end of the year, there was a remaining fund balance in that fund of about $6.7 million of unspent bond proceeds. So as far as operational year-end results go, we usually focus on the general fund because that's your main operating fund and it's the fund you have the most discretion over. So if we jump to page 54, that's kind of the income statement for the general fund along with the budgetary comparison information. And I've also inserted, for those of you who are here, a legal sized handout of a 10-year general fund comparison that we'll get to and kind of go over. So for the year overall, the general fund balance increased this year by $1,592,156. This is slightly down from last year's surplus of $1,873,663, but still very strong. So on the revenue side, revenues are up total from last year by roughly $758,000. This is mostly due to the school safety grant, which got finished up being spent and recognized as revenue this year. Also, general ed aid and special aid were both up with enrollment numbers. And kind of a glitch this year, or I don't know if we call it a glitch, but an anomaly that happened last year that will count for major change this year was the state contribution to the PERA fund and the TRA fund. TRA was a negative contribution last year, so this year it's positive, so that results in a swing from last year to this year as well. All these aid increases helped offset a reduction in impact aid of roughly $607,000. So overall aids and revenues were up. Expenditures were up approximately $1.2 million from last year. This increase is largely made up of $500,000 in additional capital outlay over last year. Again, a lot of that being the school safety grant. Salaries and benefits increased to roughly a little over $400,000 from the previous year. And like I mentioned, that's that PRA, TRA aid. That requires you to record a revenue and expense that basically offset each other. But last year was negative and this year's positive. So the swing is roughly almost $300,000 between last year and this year. But it accounts for some of the change in the year that is quite significant. So as far as budget to actual and variances go, You can see most line items are favorable, which you would expect since you had a good surplus. Revenue line items that were over budget were general ed aid, special ed aid, and impact aid, all of which are largely student driven. Expenditures in total were under budget by roughly $462,000. You'll see the two largest budget differences are in regular instruction and instructional support programs. And this is really kind of a result of I don't know how you explain it, accounting procedure that happens at the end of the year. I discussed this with Michelle at the end of the year, kind of late to kind of make the formal change. But what it is and what happens is kind of when payroll is run, the expenses are dumped into a code, and that's the code that the budget exists in. But at year end, she has to allocate payroll to quote unquote spend restricted revenues, such as basic skills, learning development, or impact aid. And she has some discretion there as to who she uses when. Some people qualify for both, and impact aid can be spent with almost anybody and anything. So sometimes what happens is she'll move a payroll cost that's in regular instruction to an instructional support code. So now you have expense that move, but there's no way without amending the budget to take the budget for that cost with. So it looks like the way we have here, like she overspent in instructional support. Well, really, that's not necessarily true because there's still that budget up in regular instruction. So we discussed this at the end of the year, and we're comfortable that that's what happened. And we're going to kind of maybe look at this again next year, and maybe she'll either run the numbers or figure out what part of that budget gets moved, or just formally amend those line items in the budget so that it's comparable. To be clear, the budget was not overspent in these. It's just it didn't get moved, and it kind of throws comparability off. So it's, again, still well under budget of $462,000 from the final approved budget. So if you look at that 10-year comparison that we do, we kind of compare the last 10 years. And what we like to do at the bottom is we run a little calculation of the numbers of months expenditures and unassigned fund balances. And this is kind of a way to measure how much safety net you have, or ability to handle unexpected expenditures or a loss of funding. It's kind of a measure of how healthy you're sitting, which I think is probably going to be important in the next year or two, considering the effect of the pandemic has had on the state's budget and also the federal budget as well. These things, obviously trickle down to local governments that get funded. So it's possible, aid will get reduced as the state tries to deal with their less revenue they have taken in. So if you look at this year's, the surplus this year, you calculate it out at roughly 5.2 months expenditures in your fund balance. But then, if we noted in the past, you also have assigned fund balance of $1,317,000. This is still discretionary portion of your fund balance. You have set it aside for specific purposes, but you can rescind this. It's not restricted by state mandate or anything. And if you were to add that back into your calculation, you'd be at almost 6.69 months. So generally, the rule of thumb, the state auditor recommends roughly 5 months or possibly less for school districts because your funding is a little bit more spread out versus other like cities and towns where their aid only comes in at certain times a year. So the district's policy has been to strive for three months, and you've been well over that now for the last couple of years. At least 3 years you've met that. So that's good considering some of the uncertainty that might be coming down the pike in the next couple of years. So as far as the remaining fund statements go, I wasn't getting into those too deep, but the debt service fund, the food service fund, the community service fund all had small deficits. And as I mentioned before, the building construction fund still has $6.67 million remaining as those construction projects really were just starting to get going at the end of the year, the beginning of this fiscal year. So obviously that'll change this year. And then the district-wide statements in the front, they're showing a surplus of approximately $1.9 million. So finally those district-wide statements make a little more sense than they have in the past years as far as, how could we have had such a decent year with our general fund and then the district-wide doesn't. They kind of followed more of what we would expect this year. And that's largely due to the pension swings not being as drastic as they had been in previous years. So finally, the last thing I had in the handouts was the report letter. This is what we are required to give to those charged with governance. In this case, it's the school board. It just provides a broad executive summary of the overall audit. We discuss a variety of things like significant changes in reporting estimates. We note the new accounting policy of the GASB 84 fiduciary statement being adopted this year. And also, if we had any problems with the audit, they'd also be reported here as well, which we did not. So that's really all I had for you. But we would just like to thank Michelle and the district staff for all their help. We tried to do a lot more remotely this year, and she was very helpful with getting us that. And really, we were more prepared, being able to see more of it ahead of time. So when we came, we were a little more aware of what was going on. So again, we really appreciate how smooth the audit goes when we get here. So if there's any questions now, I'd be happy to try and address anything that you might have noted or you reviewed.
So why the swing with the retirement? Was it the state mandated some different percentages?
Well, so what happens is every year the PERA and the TRA undergo actuarial valuations. And they look at things like life expectancies, interest returns or rate of return on the investments, and then they'll change some assumptions. And then when they do that, then we get these big swings. So a couple of years ago, they changed a discount rate, and they also changed some assumptions. And then I think also a couple of years ago, the state decided, okay, we're going to contribute X amount into the fund, and that also changes. So what happens is these swings, they adjust the liability accordingly. And when even if they're small, like just a percentage change in the discount rate will either bump your liability way up, or if they raise it, it'll drop it way down. Well, now they've kind of leveled off on these changes. So the adjustment to the liability, actually this year, I believe your total liability only went up, I don't know, a couple $100,000 maybe at the most. So now all we're doing is amortizing these big swings from the previous years into pension expense. So last year, well, actually, if you remember 2 years ago, it went way up and then they changed and it went way down so that your pension expense was actually negative. Now this year, it's starting to level off, and these differences are getting amortized over how many years. And hopefully it stays that way, because it's not fun to try and explain.
And maybe just to note, it's not a number that we calculate or Chris calculates. It's a number that comes directly from the state.
Yeah. And again, just to emphasize, the liability is not, I think it's like 6 million or something like that. I got to look. That's not something that you're going to have to write a check for. Your liability is set in statute based on payroll. There's a percentage of payroll that you match of your employees' payroll, and that won't change unless statute changes. So.
Right. It's just tough when you see it on your financial statements and you're going, ooh, you kind of, if you don't get an explanation.
It's 5 million looks like a lot, but that would never come to it all at once. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Did anybody else have any other specific questions for Chris or?
Okay. So this is the first reading, so we got some time to look at it, and
Yep.
And we can come back to the motion when we get to it during the regular. So
Sounds good.
all right. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
And now we'll move on to reports. Is there any board reports to report on? I can't remember. I don't think anything is met, have they?
Nope, not since the last meeting.
And I don't see is there a student on? I don't think there is. Okay, principals, we'll go to Lori Johnson.
All right, a little more to report this month. We continue to work on the Comprehensive Literacy State Development Grant, and we're focusing on that Tier 1 instruction, the alignment of ELOs and standards, both horizontally and vertically. Teachers have also been working on PLC and individual goals in the areas of math and reading. I think another thing to put out there is that the coaches are again working on the coffee collaboration, where we're trying to get teachers to share some of the expertise and knowledge they have with other teachers. So that's kind of a new thing that they've brought in with the grant as well. I'm asking permission to hire Sasha Munell as the special education para. Jenna Jeving is the special education para. Taylor Benson is a cook for our food service program. And Cynthia Bement is our elementary para to help with our food service program for the 3 hours each day. Attendance in September was 97%. At that time, we were around the 276 students. That fluctuated a little bit. Behavior referrals in September, we had 0 major office referrals. We have been keeping Mrs. Haverkamp quite busy. She's been helping with the child care scheduling, lesson planning, communicating with families and agencies as we've been working on some attendance and truancy concerns, working with the staff, the COVID committees to help brainstorm and assist our students who are in need of that academic and attendance support, and then getting our house system up and running in the new hybrid distance learning model that we're in. Childcare, our numbers continue to climb. We are up to about 100 registered students. That's not saying all 100 are in the school throughout the week, but we have 100 that are signed up. And we continue to use the school in Ogama for the childcare, but we are at a point where we're getting close to running out of some options and staffing that are needed if we continue to add more, as we're trying to maintain that social distancing. So we're trying to be as creative as we can. We currently are running 4 different rooms Monday through Thursday, and we have 6 rooms going on Friday. October 7th through the 11th was Fire Safety Week. We did not take the traditional field trip to Ogama Fire Hall this year, but students did continue to learn about fire safety in their rooms. September students of the month, we had kindergarten, Sophia Latka, Elizabeth Thompson, Gunnar Tibbetts, Chloe Soring, and also Makona Kieser, and she wasn't on the original report. I apologize for that. So Makona Kieser should be added to kindergarten as well. First grade, Landon LaRude, Zaylin Thompson, and Hunter Adams. Second grade, Abby Jareva, Sean Bush, Erilyn Brem, and Aurora Bruner. And third grade, David Harding, Riley Berry, and Austin Pinsky. Would like to thank the food service staff, Mary Tyken, Taylor Benson, Cynthia Bement and Ogama, Christy Walton, Billie Jean Benson, and Waubun for their hard work, especially during this pandemic as they've been getting meals prepped and ready, both hybrid and to send out. And then also want to celebrate National Principals Month, the National Association of Secondary School Principals. I would like to thank Eric Martinez for his dedication and support in helping our students, family, and staff at Waui Schools. We're very fortunate to have him with us. So that's everything that I have. Do you guys have any questions for me?
No questions. Thank you, Lori. Mr. Martinez.
Just I have some couple of notes here. We did hire Walter Matos as our ISS supervisor. Mr. Kanad has agreed to fill in for parts of our LD position. And I added some of our staff development, just our EBTs and all that. I won't read through every single one of them, but I did give you guys plenty of reading material. And this is done in conjunction with our coaches, Charlene and our staff. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that everything's aligned and make sure that everything's working for our students. School management function, as you can see later on in the recognitions, homecoming is coming. Planned for October 26th through 30th. All will be socially distanced and masked events. Dress-up days are as follows. Pajama day on, in case you guys wanted to join along, Pajama day on Monday, Jersey day on Tuesday, Triple H day on Wednesday, which is going to be either hunting, or being a hobo. Inside Out day on Thursday, and Spirit day, as always, on Fridays. There'll be virtual Pep Fest, and we're in the process of creating a streaming version of the coronation. Been a lot of tremendous work being done on this end. We did have College Awareness Week from October 12th through October 15th. And then this week, we're currently in Unity Week. This is a week filled with anti-bullying strategies and activities. I did put in the discipline report. As you can see, one of the nice things about COVID-19 is that the discipline is way down. So that is one thing, but that's due to low numbers and kids wanting to be in school. Our attendance reporting as of October 12th, grade 4 is at 89.83, grade 5 at 93.12, grade 6 at 90.35, grade 7 at 97.02, grade 8 at 96.74, grade 9 at 96.56, grade 10 at 97.32, and grade 11 97.32, and then grade 12 at 96.64. As Ms. Johnson said, I'd like to recognize our school custodians, truly one of our keys to our successes. Thank you to all that they're doing, especially during this time. There's a lot of things that we're having them do during this pandemic. And then also, like Ms. Johnson said, the National School Lunch Week. Thank you to our cooks, all district-wide, providing great meals. And once again, providing all the after-school stuff and all that. Ms. Johnson stole my thunder there. According to NASSP, National, and Governor Waltz, it is National and Minnesota Principals Month. We can't think of a more outstanding principal than Mrs. Johnson. Always going above and beyond to ensure all of our students succeeds. Did want to do a congratulations to our students of the month. I'll start with September student of the month, senior student of the month with Noah Schneck. He was also, by the way, and I'll put this in next month's report, our KRGB student of the week last week. Congratulations to Elena Gary for being selected the October senior student of the month. And then the following students were selected students of the month. For grade 6, it's Jackson Jareva, Zachary Zimma, Katie Zimma. Grade 5, Blair Ingebrigtsen, Presley Zimma, Cade Waltz. And then grade 4, Macy Jaskin, Clementine Straw, Tristan Bellinger, and Reed Jareva. Any questions on my report?
Okay, thank you, Eric.
Thank you, guys.
On to Charlene Gillis.
Okay, I don't have a whole lot to say as far as assessments. Our testing has been pretty much completed. Our STAR data is provided, and we'll get to that in a minute. For our grants, our Title I, Title II, and Title IV have all been approved by MDE, which has been kind of in an interesting fall because we have new monitors for everything. So getting them to know us and us to know them and how they want things has been a little interesting. So everything's went pretty well. So that's a great thing. Our STAR math and reading scores are provided. The Renaissance got rid of the form one of the reports that I pulled a lot of our data from other years. So, I thought this one, the way I presented it to you is probably the easiest as far as to explain. We got the grades from 2 to 11 down, and how this is divided is by percentiles. It goes below the 25th percentile. It goes from 25 to 49, from 50 to 74, and then the 75th and above percentile. I also indicated how many students we tested per each grade and how many students have not tested yet, because I think that's really important too, because we have, in some of these grades, we have quite a few that haven't tested yet, whether it's distance learning or they haven't been in the class to be tested. And I just wanted to make sure that you guys saw that some of the numbers seem kind of skewed, and that is as to why. I'm thinking with our next round of testing in November, things should hopefully get better as far as the numbers and being able to test from a distance. For those students that are below the 25th percentile from the STAR math and reading are being progress monitored on a more closely leveled through Ames Web to kind of make sure that they're not falling through the cracks and things like that. Something too is a lot of these kids haven't been in class since March. We knew the numbers were going to be startling, to say the least. But as I'm looking through and really looking at where the kids are at, it wasn't quite as bad as I was expecting. And granted, it is still alarming, but we do have a lot of people that are really invested in making sure that these kids do get the supports that they need, and so they don't lag behind, and we are where we need to be. So those students that are below the 25th percentile that receive the extra help, they will be on their way to being hopefully sufficient by the end of the year, or proficient. Those that are in the are already at the 50 percentile and above have a very likely chance of being proficient, or a high likelihood of being proficient on the MCAs in the spring. So as far as I'm concerned, the group that we really need to push and to watch closely and to really challenge them is that 25th to 49 percentile, to get them to make sure that they are on track and to become proficient. So that's about all I have for that. Any questions?
I got one. When you look at the STAR reading, okay, I think I was just reading it wrong. The total tested for both of them would be 336, correct? For both the reading and the math?
They could vary a little bit depending on 11th grade gets a little bit tricky because some aren't in any math classes. They will take online, things like that. It becomes a lot harder to get those tested.
Okay. So is there anything we can do to get the distance learning students to test? Is there any carrot or?
We have, some of the teachers have given the students the password to get into the tests, so they are able to test at home. Some teachers are very reluctant to give them, and it's just more, I'll be honest with you, when a lot of the teachers were giving this test, I was out on bereavement, and I didn't get to the message that Eric had left for me as far as giving the password out. So some teachers gave it and some teachers did not. So.
Okay.
And some of those kids that did not test, I know darn well they're doing very well. So.
And it's the first of 4 assessments as well. So it's a STAR assessment. So we've got some room there, and we'll get as many tested as possible.
And November, next week, right around the corner. So usually we test on either side of the quarter break, and quarter ends already November 6th. So they'll be doing testing the week before and then that week after. I know it's hard to believe that this quarter is already almost over. Any questions, comments?
No? Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
On to business manager, Michelle.
Okay. So Chris was here and presented the audit. Again, just kind of echoing what he said. I feel like the year went very, very well considering some of the challenges that we had throughout the year. Again, happy with where the fund balance is at. One thing I just wanted to note is that, the last 3 months of this school year, we had our typical expenditures, but we didn't have a lot of transportation, a lot of events that kids were going to, field trips, things like that. So a lot of our underspending is coming from those aspects. So just kind of wanted to note that. Right now, currently, working on, wrapping things up, getting things submitted to the state with the audit. Chris and I just talked about, what next week looks like as far as getting things finalized and things like that. Working on a current year budget update right now. So I pulled some ADM numbers based off of Deja's last Mars submission to kind of see where we're sitting at as far as looking at that average daily membership number, because that's what we use to budget. And so, looking at that and then plugging in updated grant numbers, expenditures, things like that. So kind of working our way through that. One thing that we're still maintaining and keeping a close eye on is ADMs, the student count, and we're gonna do some adjusting based on, I feel like we maybe went a little bit higher and we had more kids maybe go other places at first. And so we'll kind of watch that trend to see if they migrate back maybe eventually, or if kind of where that lies. But just again, playing that very, very conservative, because I think that we do have some unusual swings this year with the situation that we're in. So, but it's hard to project that when you don't know. You can't use those typical year situations. So, and then so basically just finishing up those things. As you remember hearing about, we got COVID relief dollars from the state, and then that also included what they're calling ESSER, and then the governor's fund, which is the GEAR fund. So those three funds total just under $550,000, and that is going to be specifically related to COVID pandemic expenses. So keeping your school up and running, sanitizing, extra staffing time, running essential childcare, the different types of supplies that we've needed to equip our distance learners, different manipulatives. There's been a whole slew of things, and each of these three funds has some different caveats with it. So the GEAR fund we've spent, that's all technology based. That was buying the smart spots for connectivity to the internet and things like that. COVID relief funds, those have to be spent by December 30th and have to be drawn down at the state level. It was federal dollars that the state rolled over to us. And so that's where we've paid for the temp scanners, all of our PPE stuff that we're doing. And we have, I actually just did some orders, kind of making sure that we're stocked for a little while. It seems like our use has kind of increased with PPE. We're getting more requests for restocking the buses with masks and things like that. And so just kind of making sure we have enough on hand for those surges that come when everybody wants to be restocked and replenished and stuff. So, and then, the sanitizer machines, the sanitizer itself, you would not believe how many crazy kinds of little expenses that have come up, from floor markings to this, to that. And I was putting numbers together and looking at things, and that stuff adds up really, really, really quickly. Before you know it, just your signage that you're required to do, and your markings on your floor, and your social distancing and things like that. I mean, you're sitting at thousands of dollars already. And it's just, so it's nice that we have extra dollars from the state and from the federal government to help support what the pandemic has done for us in as far as trying to reopen schools and keep kids here. Because boy, could you imagine taking all those expenses out of your own general fund, to try to, those are one-time things, and they're very, very hard to gauge. So kind of solidifying, the last plan that we have to solidify is the ESSER funding, and that actually we can use this year and next year. That actually crosses fiscal years. And so the thing that the state is saying is that they're saying, plan strategically and plan for the next 2 years, because not knowing where this is going to end up and what's going to happen, as we're coming into the spring, you may need some of those dollars next year yet. So we're kind of holding off a little bit on that one. We've got it kind of written. We've got the funding, but we need to get the budget in and get the plan submitted to the state. But we're looking at a January 31st due date for this because we're not looking at expending any of those funds right away. So I've been kind of, putting expenses here and then moving them over here and then moving them back because things change. And so it's just really trying to manage those funds. And then I guess long story short, with just the budget revision stuff, looking at, staffing, I think we're settling in with staffing. We've still got 1 or 2 open positions potentially. So, but looking at finalizing that and then having a finance committee meeting hopefully before the November board meeting, just to kind of review where the revenue would be at and expenditures and kind of strategically starting to talk about potentials for next year. Does anybody have any questions? We did, I'll just make another note. We did actually have a meeting with ICS to kind of go through and make sure that we tied out to what they had because they track through Procure. And then, obviously I'm cutting the checks to all the vendors on my end. And so we just did a Zoom meeting and kind of went through and we're all on track between ICS and us. We show the same thing. We're showing the same budget tracking and things like that. So that was nice to go through that and know that we're good. And then we're going to keep doing that reconciliation process every couple months so that if there are errors or something that has been missed on my end or their end, we catch that sooner than later because we're getting in the meat of this project and the bills are starting to come in now. So.
Okay, any questions for Michelle? Sounds like a lot of different stuff going on, so, yeah. All right, thank you. Now on to Mrs. Weber.
Just starting out with, we've got a special board meeting that we scheduled for Monday, November 9th to canvass returns of the election from November 3rd. So if we can put that on your calendars, we usually do that on a morning meeting, and I know it's never fun to do a Monday morning meeting. But we have, 10 days to try to fit that in, and it's kind of nice with not kind of knowing how the after election is going to go with mail-ins, and if there's some follow-up with that, thought it would be wise to maybe schedule that kind of in the middle in case we have to reschedule if there's issues. So if that's okay with you guys, if we look at that November 9th, I don't know what time, if you guys want to go 7:30 maybe, do a 7:30. Usually that meeting takes us about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Does that work?
Works for me. I won't be sitting in the deer stand either, so.
So that would be Monday, November 9th, 7:30. We'll send out a notice. And that would be canvassing returns from the election. So, and then that would give us a little bit of a leeway if we had to reschedule, but very little. But there would be room. Then the other thing is just making you aware that the MSBA Leadership Conference, they are looking at scheduling in person January 15th, 14th and 15th at the Minneapolis Convention Center. So we'll see how that goes. That may be giving a virtual option also, but at this point they are looking at in person in Minneapolis. So if there's any of you that are interested in that, that's always a good professional development opportunity. The issue with that is that's a free registration for school board members, but we need to book hotels ahead of time. So if any of you are interested in that, we need to know about the hotel. I can always cancel it, but it's hard to get them after the fact. So if you're interested, please let me know sooner than later so we can book that. And then enrollment trends, the distance learners, we found out that has gone down. So if you look on the side, there's less than 168. Some of those distance learners have come back to hybrid. So I need to readjust those numbers. And even the 743, like I said, I want to retake a look at enrollment as we switch to Synergy. And then we also have a homeroom count that we're doing as students enroll, doing a hand count. Just want to take another look at that. But our enrollment numbers are looking very good. So we want to take a look at those again and take a look to make sure that they're accurate. I will update you when Weber Weekly. As I was doing this report, Deja had just submitted Mars, and I got these from Deja, but we want to take a look again at those Mars report and go back and compare. Tammy compared to our homeroom report, but we had some change in distance learners that hadn't been updated, so we want to take another look at that. So I will give you an update on enrollment trends through a Weber Weekly and then post those. Construction update. As we look at the project, a lot busier. You're going to see a lot more contractors if you drive by on site. So we will have multiple contractors on site. You might see that, snow fence out there. They might have to move that snow fence back to make room for another trailer. A general contractor is probably going to be moving a trailer on site also. And you'll see multiple contractors on site. They are looking at having walls up, roofs up, insulation in, and having heaters moved in November 12th. Might even have that moved up quicker after the next couple of weeks we're going to have. But they are making good progress and the schedule is on time. And I did include the schedule in your packet so you can get an idea of the schedule on how that's all going. The house across the street, they were not able. We do have another buyer that's interested, and she's getting bids to move the house, but they weren't able to try to get the house moved before winter because they're looking at moving it just around the corner and having a foundation put in. So they wouldn't be able to get the foundation put in before winter, so they're looking at some other arrangements. So there is some bids being made and some arrangements. So there's a potential of that happening sometime this winter or in the spring and having the house put on a foundation. So there are some movements and possibilities on the house that are still happening. But I think we're on plan C or D at this point, but we're still working on the house. And then I wanted to visit a little bit about the current learning model and talk a little bit about where we may be going because of the increased accounts, just because some of the people that may be online at home may not want to wait to the last agenda item. So I'll speak briefly to it and then we'll talk more about it at the end of the agenda. Current learning model, obviously in the hybrid model. And it was only a couple of weeks ago that we were addressing people's questions about why we can't move back to in-person learning. And we addressed the numbers and the county counts in the different counties. And as we look at our counts in the different counties, we're looking at increased numbers. And I did not get numbers for this week, and I don't get my updates. I meet with public health tomorrow. So I'll get the increased numbers or the numbers tomorrow, and we know they are increasing. But we are in the 50s and 60s. This week we're in the 60s for Mahnomen and Becker County, White Earth. So we know that those numbers are increasing. And so as we look at the models and you look at that chart there, if we are in the 30s to 50s, the model from Minnesota Department of Education is hybrid elementary and distance learning for high school. And when we're in the 50s, we're looking at distance learning for all learners. And so when we start looking at that 50s for 2 or 3 weeks, we need to take some serious look at distance learning. So what we did is, as we visited with public health, we started looking at some questions and created some questions on, we don't have to just look at case counts. When we started the school year, and what can be really confusing for people is we started the school year, Department of Education and Department of Health were pretty strict about, here's the model you need to start in. And you need to submit that model, and there was really strong guidelines. Once we get into the year, they're saying, here's what it is. And if you're not going to move, you have to be able to tell us why. And they're still going to give you guidance, but it's strong guidance. And so we are looking at case counts, obviously, and that still needs to be a driving factor. But then we can be looking at, are there positive case counts that are directly impacting the school community, or is it in your community? You know, is it affecting certain clusters in the community? Is it affecting different age groups? What is the impact on the safety in your school? Is it first and second hand in the school? Or is it positive cases in the school? There's a very difference to the safety factor and risk factor to the students and staff. And then what's affecting us right now the most is, do we have enough staff to cover any illnesses or to deliver a quality education and remain open? Right now, what's happening to us is because of firsthand contact or positive cases in the home, we're losing staff and we're having trouble having enough staff subs to keep the system going. And so that might be what does us in even sooner than the numbers do. But that's becoming a significant struggle, is having enough staff. Not to even consider the wellness of the staff and how it's impacting them. The next one is, if we have to start shutting down for 2 weeks at a time, we may need to consider just doing full-time distance learning and do one thing and do it well for an extended period of time, and then reestablish reopening goals. So I'll talk a little bit more about that a little later, but you may hear of schools that close for 2 weeks and open for 2 weeks and then close for 2 weeks and open for 2 weeks. That's not good for education. It's not good for our parents. It's not good for our kids. It's not good for our staff. And what happens in those cases, as we're seeing this happen, is that they're closing for 2 weeks. And the reason they're doing that, the concept is, well, if you close for 14 days, everybody has 14 days to isolate and quarantine, and then that should take care of the virus, because that's how many days it takes. What we're finding is that not everybody in our community is following those guidelines. Not everybody is staying home and doing what they're supposed to do. They're not isolating, they're not quarantining. And so then they're coming back and they spread the virus in school, and then they have to close again, and the process starts all over again. So it's not creating the solution it was intended to create when the Department of Health created that model. And so I think we need to look at our community and make decisions based on our community. And then once again, we may not have a choice. So number 6 is, we may have to do what the Department of Education and the Department of Health guidelines and mandates tell us we have to do. So once again, we have some discretion. And the reason we created these questions is so that when the Department of Health and Department of Education call us, that we will work with our regional public health teams and our response team and say, here's what we have to offer. We're being as safe as we can. We're following safety protocols. We are monitoring first contacts, second contacts. We're monitoring who's positive. We're doing everything we can to be responsive and safe. We started a campaign to say, wear masks, be safe, keep us open as long as we can. We are doing everything we can to stay open for as long as we can and be as responsive as we can to the needs of our staff and our students and our community. And so I think we're doing everything we can to stay open at this point. And we're doing everything we can to protect our hybrid plan. And if the numbers change, we will go back to in person as soon as we possibly can. But at this point, I feel like we're fighting with all of our might to stay in a hybrid. Any questions for me at this point?
Nope, just some sobering news.
One of these days, I'm going to tell you really good news. The good news is, I can tell you some good news right now. We have had some close calls, and we have not had to send home more staff or more kids because they have followed safety protocols. We had some issues I got to dig into a little bit deeper because I got more information. Today is an example where I might have to do a little bit more investigating because I got more information today on a case. But when we do close contact investigations, there have been times, I'm going to give you an example. I did a close contact investigation where I might have had to send home an additional 4 staff, and they literally measured how far apart they had to sit to eat lunch when they ate lunch, so they weren't close contacts. And so we didn't have to send those people home because they weren't close contacts, because they were 6 feet apart to 8 feet apart when they had lunch. And the person that was positive thought they might have, been first contacts because they ate lunch with somebody. When you follow the safety protocols and do what you're supposed to do, you get to stay at work. You get to stay safe. You get to make good choices. When you don't follow those safety protocols, you start, it's like dominoes, and we start to fall, and you can impact spread. And so there have been numerous times that we have done these, and you find out when people follow safety protocols and do what we're supposed to do in the guidelines, it works. And so we really have to continue to spread that to our community, to our staff, to our students over and over again, that when we follow safety protocols, we protect one another and it keeps our school open. And so the good news is that has happened over and over and over again when we've done interviews. And when it doesn't, we're going to keep digging deeper and deeper to make sure that we reduce that risk and mitigation, whether that's in school or out of school, so that we can try to keep school open. So there is good news. That's been more than not, that's been the case. So our staff and our kids are doing a good job. You should be very proud of them. I know I am.
Good. That's good to hear.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else or any questions for Lisa? All right. Thank you. And I don't think Paul is on. I believe his report's in our packet. And Dan's report is also here. We'll go to Travis. Do you have anything else to report? Okay, thank you. There's any non-certified representative or certified? I don't believe so. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion, Derek.
Motion by Derek.
I'll second.
Second by John Zimmer. Roll call vote. John Zimmer.
Yes.
Terry Dorman.
Yes.
Vicki Bevins.
Yes.
Nick MacArthur.
Yes.
Derek Coben.
Yes.
Alan Harrow, yes. Motion passes. I believe is there any other recognitions? I think they were covered by both principals.
Not the homecoming candidates, Mr.
Not the
Howell.
homecoming okay, sorry, I'll read those off. Congratulations to the homecoming candidates: Elizabeth Burnett, Elena Gary, Caitlin Kieser, Noah Schneck, Brandon Swedberg, and Jay-Z Van Pelt.
Then make sure that we also add the principals to the agenda too, or to the minutes too.
Okay.
Congratulations to our principals. We do have great building leaders. They are fantastic instructional leaders, building leaders. They do a great job, and we are very fortunate to have them. Thank you both, Eric and Lori.
Yes, thank you from the board as well. So, public comment. I'm going to read this script. Persons who wish to address the board need to email at publiccomment@waubun.k12.mn.us. The person shall state the reason for addressing the board and shall be limited in length and time at the discretion of the board chair. Patrons should not expect a response from the board. If appropriate, the board chair will direct follow-up activities. All comments must be in accordance with board policies. Any old business? If not, move the 10.1 under new business. Presentation of the first reading, which we went over with Chris at the beginning of the meeting. Is there a motion to approve the first reading of the auditor's report?
Motion, Derek.
Motion by Derek.
A second.
Second by Vicki. Do a roll call vote. John Zimmer.
Yes.
Terry Dorman,
Yes.
Derek Hoban,
Yes.
Nick MacArthur,
Yes.
Vicky Bevins,
Yes.
Alan Hogo, yes. Motion passes. 10.3, approve lane change request for Peyton Mills. Is there a motion to approve the lane change?
All motion.
Derek. Oh, sorry.
By John Zimmer, second by Derek Hoban. Roll call vote, John Zimmer,
Yes.
Terry Dorman,
Yes.
Derek Hoban,
Yes.
Nick MacArthur,
Yes.
Vicky Bevins, Alan Hogo, yes. Motion passes. Now, on the 10.4, to approve the annual assurance and compliance report.
This is just a yearly report that has multiple district compliance reports, such as civil rights reports, mandated reporting reports, just multiple reports that need to be done yearly. Deb goes through, makes sure that all the manuals are updated. All of those reports are posted in the work lounges. And then I submit to the MDE to make sure that those are updated. It's a lot of employee rights, right to know trainings. So all of those are done and submitted.
All motion.
Motion by John Zimmer, second.
Second, Derek.
Second by Derek Hoban. Roll call vote, John Zimmer,
Yes.
Terry Dorman,
Yes.
Derek Hoban,
Yes.
Nick MacArthur,
Yes.
Vicky Bevins,
Yes.
Alan Hogo, yes. Motion passes. On the 10.5, approval of compulsory attendance report.
Yeah, once again, this is a yearly report. It's students that are either in a homeschool for beginning of the year, and we have 2 5-year-olds and 1 6-year-old that are doing homeschooling this year. So, and that has been submitted. So,
Is there a motion to approve it?
All motion.
Motion by John Zimmer,
Second, Derek.
second by Derek Hoban. Roll call vote, John Zimmer,
Yes.
Terry Dorman,
Yes.
Derek Hoban,
Yes.
Nick MacArthur,
Yes.
Vicky Bevins,
Yes.
Alan Hogo, yes. Motion passes. On the 10.6, snow removal bid.
we received 1 bid for snow removal for the rate of $130 an hour from Jeff Haberkamp.
What was that last year?
The bid was $130,000 an hour.
Last
So
year.
it is.
Was it an increase from last year?
Yep, last year was 110.
Okay.
It was a different vendor last year who didn't submit.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the bid?
Motion, Derek.
Motion by Derek Hoban. Second.
I'll second it, Terry.
Second by Terry Dorman. Roll call vote, John Zimmer,
Yes.
Terry Dorman,
Yes.
Derek Hoban,
Yes.
Nick MacArthur,
Yes.
Vicky Bevins,
Yes.
Alan Hogo, yes. Motion carries. On the 10.7, approval of a $4,000 donation from Community Development Bank.
Troy Grosh from the Community Development Bank has been visiting for quite a while on wanting to sponsor something for the school district that was COVID related and try to meet some needs. And he and some of the staff had been visiting, like I said, for a few months. And then finally he contacted us and just said, what would you think about a $4,000 donation to go to meet your needs? And we said, yes, thank you. So we'd like to thank them for that and approve the donation, recommend approving the donation.
Do I have a motion to approve the donation?
Motion, Derek.
Motion by Derek Hoban,
I'll second.
second by Vicky Bevins. Roll call vote, John Zimmer,
Yes.
Terry Dorman,
Yes.
Derek Hoban,
Yes.
Nick MacArthur,
Yes.
Vicky Bevins,
Yes.
Alan Hoggle, yes. Motion carries. Yes, and thank you to the Community Development Bank for that generous donation. On to 10.8, approve policy 419, tobacco-free environment.
This policy is being updated again. It has just some definition changes again from electronic devices, vaping, tobacco, and chemicals that are considered under this policy. The biggest change is the requirement that vaping prevention is taught at least once during grades 6 through 8. So before it was recommended, now it's required. And then the vaping toolkit that is available from and offers that schools may teach it in grades 9. So it's required in 6 through 8, and that we may teach it in grades 9 through 12. And then we'll just make sure that it's part of our health curriculum.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the policy?
All motion.
Motion by John Zimmer,
Second, Nick.
second by Nick MacArthur. Roll call vote. John Zimmer,
Yes.
Terry Dorman,
Yes.
Derek Hoban,
Yes.
Nick MacArthur,
Yes.
Vicky Bevins,
Yes.
Alan Hogo, yes. Motion approved. On the 10.9, approve policy 516, student medication.
This one just talks about how to dispose of controlled substances and non-controlled substances. And it just talks about that it's a parent's responsibility to transport and retrieve controlled substances. And then it just talks about how to control unclaimed or abandoned prescription or controlled substances. So just defines more of a process.
Okay, is there a motion to approve policy 516?
Terry, move.
Motion by Terry. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by John Zimmer. Roll call vote. John Zimmer,
Yes.
Terry Dorman,
Yes.
Derek Hoban,
Yes.
Nick MacArthur,
Yes.
Vicky Bevins,
Yes.
Alan Hogo, yes. Motion approved. On the 10.10, approve the dues for membership in Minnesota State High School League for $2,669.
Yep, if you remember when we talked about the increase of dues, they increased significantly, since the pandemic. They talked about raising them. It was $110 a student for $1,650. And so then that went up to $160 a student. So now $2,669. Plus they added what they call a COVID fee, one in November and one in February, for a total bill of $7,669. So a significant increase fee. So, what we're recommending is just paying the student fee at the beginning of the year now. The superintendents, the Minnesota School Board Association and the Minnesota Association of School Boards have requested meetings with them, have been meeting with them, are not real happy about the COVID fees. We can pay out of ESSER funds, but we still don't believe it's an appropriate request for us. Yes, their costs are going up because of COVID, but so are our costs. And so at this point, I recommend that we just pay the student fees. It's still a $50 increase per student. However, it's a co-op, and we are participating in activities. Whether we continue to have that increase go to next year or not, we are participating right now. And I don't know that it's anything that we're going to get resolved this year. And so I do recommend we pay it this year, and that we have ongoing discussions this year and going forward, and how the high school league gets restructured. I believe it will. There was an email that came out today that their top, I think 6 execs make I hate to say off the top of my head, but 1.6 million. So the very, very high paying top execs. And so I believe there will be some restructuring of the high school league over the year, but we're not going to get it resolved this fall. And I don't want our kids not to be able to participate. So my recommendation is we pay the student fees to get the year started and try to resolve the issues as we go throughout the year.
Well, that makes sense to me. So Okay, is there a motion to pay that student fee of
Motion, Derek.
$2,660? Motion by Derek.
Second. Nick.
Second by Nick. Roll call vote. John Zimmer,
Yes.
Terry Dorman,
Yes.
Derek Hoban,
Yes.
Nick McCarthy,
Yes.
Vicky Bevins,
Yes.
Alan Halgo, yes. Motion passes. 10.11, approve posting of interim activities director for the remainder of the 2021 school year.
As you saw earlier, we had a resignation of our activities director. And instead of posting and hiring at this point, as a, full-time going forward, I'm suggesting that we fill the position with an interim activities director. And instead of just using managerial rights to place somebody, I suggest that we have the conversation about doing an interim activities director. I've asked Tim Spaeth, or actually Eric asked Tim Spaeth if he'd be willing to fill that position because he has the past experience. He was our previous AD, and in COVID times, there are so many things to handle and manage stepping into this position in a current year. There isn't time for us to train. There isn't time for us to get somebody ready for this position to jump in mid-year. We need somebody with experience that knows what they're doing. And for him to be willing to do this at this point, we're very thankful. So the suggestion is for us to have this interim activities director position and have Tim step in, be placed in this position for the remainder of this year. And then we would post the position, come March, early enough that, end of February, March, to give it early enough to have anybody who, of course, internal candidates would have first choice at applying. But we would post it internally, post it externally, give people an opportunity that want the position going forward to apply and give everybody an equal opportunity to apply for the AD position going forward into the new year. So are there questions for that strategy or?
No questions. So, okay, is there a motion to approve this posting for the interim activities director for remainder of the school year?
And we would post it because it's
Right.
we want to follow the hiring procedures and posting, but it would be the intent. And I want people to know, and I wanted it to be on the board agenda to know that the intent is for us to hire Tim.
Okay,
But we would post it.
I'll make a motion.
motion by Vicky Bevins,
Second, Derek.
second by Derek Hoban. Roll call vote. John Zimmer,
Yes.
Terry Dorman,
Yes.
Derek Hoban,
Yes.
Nick MacArthur,
Yes.
Vicky Bevins,
Yes.
Alan Halgo, yes. Motion passes. And now 10.12, update on safe learning school model. I think you have a little more to discuss.
I just wanted to open a little bit more if there's any discussion any further on what we talked about, if there's any more questions you have, if there's anything, if you want to direct us in any more, to seek any more information. If you had questions about the process.
I kind of like what was the 5 points,
Yeah.
not just going off the testing numbers themselves. So, but there's other variables too to go with. So,
Yeah. And our intent would be to try to we only have 5 days given through the whole year to change models. And so we can't take all 5 days for this change. So the intent would be to give 3 days for teachers to plan, which is not enough time. But we can't take all 5 and not have any left for the next time we have to transition. And you can apply to the state for more days, but you're not guaranteed to get any. And so our intent would be to give 3 days for transition this time, and then look at if we transition back again, we would at least be guaranteed the 2 days and then apply for additional days if we need it. And so the intent would be 3 days. And so in an ideal world, we would give, a week's notice or a week ahead of time notice, and then we would have Monday, Tuesday school, and then be able to have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday planning time. Because then that would also give families the weekend and staff the weekend. so that would be an ideal world. When I say ideal world, it's also possible that we could be told you're closing tomorrow. We could be told that because of the numbers, or that could happen because we get a cluster in the school, or we can't maintain the staff to stay open. And so our intent is to give time for staff to be with their kids on a A-B day, to send home materials, to give time for planning and be able to send materials home and send home what they need for electronic equipment and chargers and all those wonderful things. So our intent is to give time for planning, to send equipment home, time to send supplies home, all of that. But we just need to be aware that this is a pandemic and a crisis, and we may not get that opportunity. Our intent is to do that. And so that may mean that we need to plan a little bit ahead. And so I think our hope was to be able to look at numbers and say, oh, maybe we can hold up for a month. I think that at this point is starting to look like a challenge. And so we also need to be realistic enough that we are giving our staff and our families time to plan. So we don't want to make a decision too soon, but if we make it too late, then we won't be giving people time to plan. So we're also being cognizant of that. And so we're walking that line. We will not have a board meeting again to make a decision about it. We will be working with our planning teams. Remember, we talked about that. Our job at this point is to keep you informed. So make sure that you are talking to us when we send out communications and talk to you if you're concerned and have questions, that you're making sure you're talking to us and letting us know those things as we go along. Because when we make the transition, we won't have time for board meetings. We're going to have to be doing public health meetings and communicating. So we're going to have to make sure that I will make sure that we're talking, and principals will be talking, and we'll make sure we're communicating, but it won't be through formal board meetings. Does that make sense? Do you remember that process we talked about?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. We're going to have to be putting our time into planning with staff, planning with public health partners, planning, and going forward. So we will make sure that we're communicating. And if there's concerns, we're sharing those, and that you're making sure you communicate those.
So Lisa, in your mind's eye, we get the numbers tomorrow? Is that correct, or is that next Thursday?
Yep, every Thursday. Yep,
Every
every Thursday. And then in between, we can get some individual day-to-day numbers. But what's nice on those Thursdays is they compile those. And they compile those. The state does it, but they're 2 weeks behind. And that's sometimes confusing for a community. We get the 2 week behind state numbers. And then we get they compile their projections and are giving us projections. So, and that's nice, because then we get those current number projections. And the reason they call them projections is that they don't have the time to statistically go out and say, here's those 1 or 2 negatives that maybe should have been in this county instead of our county, but they're pretty darn accurate. They're not too far off. But the reason they don't publish those all the time, they've given us permission to publish, but if you notice, I put those little asterisks on those and say, but it's because that there may be a couple of false positives in there.
Sure. Like you mentioned, we are walking that line,
Yes.
and you guys are going to be making a decision without the board, and that's fine. But what do you see? What's going to be the tipping point for you that says, well, we're going to shift gears, or we're going to wait for someone to say, move it to distance, or what do the numbers have to be for you, or the questions, or just?
I think the numbers are already there.
Yep.
And so along with the numbers would come the safety of our health and our students and the quality of education. So when we don't have the staff to support the quality of education, and when the safety of the staff and students start to become compromised. So when we start having a lot of positive cases in the school, and we don't have the staff to be able to support the education, or we don't have enough subs to be in the school to support the education, and education starts to be compromised, and we start having spread in the school.
So if we have none of those things, if we have no spread, if we have no cases with staff or students, and we're able to adequately staff, if the numbers continue to rise, are we staying in the hybrid model?
That will be our defense with the Department of Education when they try to close us. or
Good.
try to make us go to distance learning. We'll be able to use these indicators as, why would we need to?
Okay. That
We're
was the
able
answer I
to-
was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah, we would be able to say, and that's part of why we're doing that campaign of saying, make good choices in the community, make good choices at home. Most of our spread, all of our spread has been up to this point coming from the community. It's been coming from what's going on in our families. It's been coming on from large events outside. And then that's coming in our firsthand contacts. That has been coming into the schools. And so if we could be making good choices outside of the school, that's what's been coming in so far.
And you mentioned that video that you put out. Is that something you're going to do? How often are we going to try and put those out?
Soon as we got I think we had the activities, we put it out for, kids and staff as a choice. So I think as long as we can keep some interest and pique some interest, we'll keep doing it.
Sure.
So, I mean, that's not certainly something we can mandate, but as long as we have kids that have an interest, and the idea is if our kids can be excited about doing something, that it reinforces those skills for them. Let's social distance, let's wear a mask. And we're there.
100%. I mean,
Yeah.
we have kids that are doing great. Our discipline numbers are down. We're not having troubles in the schools because they want to be in the school. I mean, I know a lot of them don't like it, but they're doing it. And
Right.
we have adults that are not grasping the same concept, and it is becoming terribly frustrating for me as I see it in the community. We have our kids trying their butts off to do what
Yeah.
they can do to stay in school. So I like that idea of putting out those videos and just putting it out there and letting the kids speak to the community. So I'm all for that, and the more that they would want to put out, the better, I think.
And you just said something amazing. They don't like it, but they're doing it. And if they can be leaders with that message, they don't like it, but it's worth it to them to do it. And I think if we as adults can do that, we don't like it, but we're doing it. All of us deserve better. We all deserve to be living a much simpler life right now. But to get what we want, to keep our kids in school, to keep our kids learning, to keep our kids doing what they need to do, then we need to be doing some things we don't like to do. And we need to be sacrificing for our kids. And I know everybody is. That person that worked all day and came home and helped the kid with homework who's watching this is going, are you kidding me? I'm sacrificing. I get that. But it needs to go beyond that. It needs to go beyond what we're doing at the weekends and what we're doing on our social lifetime. And I know that we're asking a lot. We are. But keeping kids in school and learning is worth it. It's worth it. And so I think if our kids are willing to do more and our kids are willing to do the more videos and to try to be the leaders and educate on this topic, great, because it reinforces those skills for them. That's great. But if it means that we're pushing it and pushing them to do that, then no, I have no interest in doing that. But if they're excited about doing that and they have an interest in doing that, then absolutely, because it reinforces those skills for them. And it's an exciting, fun way to do that. If you saw the videos, they were excited to do it. They were happy to do it. And they get to be community leaders. What a great community service for them. And that's really real life learning that they get to do. A time of community need where they get to lead their community. That's what we want our kids to learn. And that's what we want, the kind of leaders we want them to be. Any
Okay.
other questions or concerns for me? And we will be making this decision, not just our admin team. Like I said, this is working with public health, both Mahnomen Public Health, with Becker County Public Health, with White Earth Public Health, with White Earth Emergency Services Management. There's a team that gives us information and works with us. We have a district COVID, team that we work with the staff, and we're trying to communicate across the way. So these aren't decisions made in isolation.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. Any other business? We got our succeeding meetings November 9th at 7:30 a.m. For canvassing, November 18th at 6 p.m. regular school board meeting, and December 16th, 6 p.m. truth and taxation, and regular board meeting to follow.
Yep. And then, as Michelle said, probably business or the finance meeting will be coming up also, but to be determined.
Okay. All right. So Anything else? Okay, if not, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion, Derek.
Motion by Derek, second. Second by John Zimmer. Roll call vote. John Zimmer,
Yes.
Terry Dorman,
Yes.
Barry Coben,
Yes.
Nick MacArthur,
Yes.
Vicky Bevins,
Yes.
Alan Halgo, yes. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Zimmer,
Yes.
Terry Dorman,
Yes.
Barry Coben,
Yes.
Nick MacArthur,
Yes.
Vicky Bevins,
Yes.
Alan Halgo, yes. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Zimmer,
Yes.
Terry Dorman,
Yes.
Barry Coben,
Yes.
Nick MacArthur,
Yes.
Vicky Bevins,